If that A grade feels far away, do not worry. By the end of this video, it's going to get a lot closer and just within your grasp. The examiner is not looking for definitions. They're not looking for full paragraphs explaining the concept first and then going into the case study. They expect direct application and direct analysis in your 8 markers. When you're answering a question of business strategy, there is no right or wrong way to recommend a strategy. As long as you're using the right techniques in the right place. Hello everyone, how's it going? My name is Yawer, and I'm sure you know me by now as the guy behind all those business videos that you've been hopefully getting the most out of on our platform. So my task here today and the objective of this video is to get you a little bit more comfortable with the upcoming exams. Of course, the new paper 3 and the new paper 4, obviously, which came up last year. It wasn't introduced before in your as part of your exams. So it's still new to us, and in the last year we've only seen 7 samples of the 4, so there isn't much to go with, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible for you to understand and how to attempt them in your own time as well. Now, the big change in last year's syllabus was that the paper 3 was split into 2 parts. So it used to be a 3-hour paper, which have 2 sections, but now they have literally split it into 2 halves, which is into a 1-hour 45-minute paper 3 and a 1-hour 15-minute paper 4. So you're still attempting for 3 hours, but it's over 2 days now in 2 papers. And what they did last year was that they had a section A which would test all your unit 1 to 5 questions, and section B was dedicated for the strategy questions. Now the strategy part has been taken into paper 4, so you don't need to worry about that appearing in paper 3, and you still see 5 questions, which used to be section A in the previous syllabus, but now that's the entire paper. 5 questions which are all from all the 5 units in your syllabus. So often students think that you may not get tested on everything in a paper, but you can be guaranteed about the fact that you will be tested on every unit in your syllabus. So leave nothing to chance. There's a high chance at anything, especially when it comes to unit 1. That when it comes to unit 1, there are 2 topics in it in total. And what CAIE guarantees that one of the 2 is reserved for paper 4, which means that the only question you're going to get from unit 1, and which will be a guaranteed question, is going to be from the topic of pastel. So make sure you go over that really well, especially because pastel is again used in paper 4 should you get a question on business strategy. So there's twice the benefit of doing that one really well. So I wanted to talk about the paper structure, since it's 5 questions. The good thing that CAIE has done, and bless them for it, is that they now standardize the way you're supposed to write your answers across AS and A2. And what that means is that in AS, you're required to answer 8 and 12 mark questions. You'll remember them as knowledge, application, and then evaluation additionally for 12 markers. Now for A2, they asked you to write 8 and 12 mark questions exactly the same way that you did in AS. So same length, so you would have usually 2 points for your 8 markers, 3 for 12, your add evaluation. So things that we've seen and we've gotten used to over the last year is exactly the way we need to present our answers going forward in the A2 exams as well. Another change is that before the new syllabus came up, they used to have a 10 marker, a 12 marker, 14, 16, 18, 20. They could come up with any combination and you'd be confused about how to answer a question that's, let's say, a 14 marks. But now you're only going to see 2 types of question in your paper 3. An 8 marker or a 12 marker. And how they made it easier is that they start off the paper with 2 8-mark questions, and the 8 markers are the same as you would answer them in AS, meaning knowledge, application, analysis only. One more way that they make it easier for you is that they would mention exactly how many questions you have or how many points you have to include in every question. For example, your 8 marker will always start with analyze 2 elements of the marketing strategy of the XYZ business. So don't beat about the bush. The examiner is not looking for definitions. They're not looking for full paragraphs explaining the concept first and then going into the case study. They expect direct application and direct analysis in your 8 markers. And you're limited in the space that's provided within which to write your answer as well. So you'll have a maximum of 24 lines. That's roughly 250 words, a full page, and that's all you have to finish your answer in. So make sure that when you're practicing at home, you know that 24 lines for an 8 marker, 36 for a 12 marker, no more. You can be less, but definitely not more. So that's paper 3, 8 and 12 mark combination. And question 3 and 4 in your paper 3 will be a combination of a 4-mark calculation and then a part B where they'll be asking you to comment on the questions. Now, a tip that I would like to give you about the way to answer your essay questions which are attached to the calculations is that let's say the calculations for ratios, and they ask you to calculate return on capital employed, then they ask you to calculate gearing ratio, and then they would ask you a question such as should the company convert itself into a private limited or a public limited company, right? Now you have to make sure that your essay answers are a combination of your quantitative analysis first, meaning whatever calculation they've asked you to do, make sure you discuss them in your answers first. So if ROCE is increasing, you'll say, of course, that's a good thing for the shareholders, you should become public. If gearing is increasing, perhaps banks won't give you the loan, so this is the time to become a public limited company. So make sure the numbers that you're calculating are being discussed in your essay answer first, quant first, and then the qualitative parts which are coming from the case study. So all the opinions on the words, everything else that's part of the paper, the case itself, analyzing and evaluating that comes second in your essay answers to calculations. And this is going to be question 3 and question 4 of paper 3. So don't forget that part, that's crucial. And then you'll finish that paper with a 12 marker by itself, the question number 5, where again, knowledge application analysis plus the evaluation of that answer must be provided with it. So that's just, in your mind, you set yourself little checkpoints that what should an answer include, what are the things that it should and should not include. And that's where it helps to look at the marks. So if it's an 8 marker, that's only asking for knowledge, application, and analysis. Knowledge does not mean define things. It means talk about the right things. The right term in the right place is going to give you the marks, not long descriptions of what the concept is actually about. So just keep those things in mind. And also when it comes to the finance questions, and this is usually the way they ask you, that they'll give you data for a couple of years. So 22, 23, they'll give them a bunch of numbers. Let's say you're given an income statement and you're asked to calculate ROCE. Now the question will ask you for only 1 year's calculation. Let's say they ask you for 2024, but they will give you the data for 2023 as well. What you got to do is make sure that you calculate it for both the years, because when you're discussing the numbers in your answers, they need to see a trend. They need to see if you're able to identify the trend, whether the ratio is increasing or decreasing, and then being able to show your understanding of how to use that number. And that's obviously where the essay answer comes in. So make sure calculate it for both the years, even though they don't ask for it, but the expectation is that you're able to show some trend analysis with the numbers. All right, so this is how your paper 3 is going to be structured. This is how the questions will appear. And this is going to tell you a few things that you should remember when starting to answer them. Now, question 1 and 2 are exactly identical. 8-mark questions, and we know for all 8-mark questions, the expectation is knowledge, application, and analysis only. Do not give your opinion, do not give recommendations, and the way the question is going to be worded is that they're going to ask for 2 points only. So don't go beyond that. And question 3 and 4 is where they will test your calculation skills. So this is going to be a calculation plus an essay answer question. Same for question number 3. Same for 4. So in total, basically, you're answering for 8 marks of calculations out of the 60 marks that you are appearing for in paper 3. So this is going to have a combination of 4 plus a 12-mark essay answer. So you are total answering for 16 marks here. So that's 8 and 8, 16, another 2, 16. That is 48, which means that the last question is going to be a standalone essay question of 12 marks. And all 12 markers, whether that's part of your essay answers or the one by itself, they all require knowledge, application, analysis, as well as evaluation. And paper 4, how it's different from paper 3, is that you're no longer asked to write an 8 or 12 marker, but rather this is the only question or only paper where you're asked to answer 20-mark questions. So in paper 4, there will only be 2 questions. And you have a 1 hour 15 minutes to answer this, which means dedicate 15 minutes to the case study, reading it. And that's including the time that you will go back and forth between questions as well. That leaves you with 30 minutes each per 20-mark question. So 30 minutes, 2 questions, that's where the other 1 hour goes. And one of these questions, the first one, or actually could be the second one, CAIE doesn't tell us which one is going to be, but one of the 2 is definitely going to be from chapter 6.2, which is business strategy. And you know that where we've learned strategic management, strategic analysis, SWOT, PESTEL, core competencies, all those techniques. And remember, when you're answering a question of business strategy, there is no right or wrong way to recommend a strategy. As long as you're using the right techniques in the right place, you could have a combination of PESTEL, SWOT, and some matrix, and then come up with a suggestion that's completely fine. And your guy sitting right next to you might have different idea of answering that question and may use completely different techniques. So there is no right or wrong way. As long as it makes sense, as long as it's relevant, any strategy you can make up with any of those techniques that you've learned in that chapter. So business strategy is definitely going to be part of your paper 4. And that's half the paper, right? That's 20 marks. So it goes to show that how important that chapter really is. So business strategy. And the other question is going to be either one of the strategy chapters from each unit or a combination of all of them. So that's 7.4, which is HRM strategy. That's 8.2 marketing strategy, 9.3 operation strategy, and 10.4 finance strategy. It could either be a combo of all 4, which is what we've seen in the specimen paper. If you've seen it, it's called Devinis Limited, and that's where they ask you about commenting on the entire business strategy, so which includes commenting about how well the marketing went in the past, operations, etc., etc. But in other situations, in other papers, we've seen that they're very specific about either just a marketing strategy, and if it's a question on marketing strategy, then of course you'll need to know what a marketing plan is and what globalization is, because those are the 2 topics that are in chapter 8.2, and most of the content given in the case study will be about either globalization or the marketing plan itself. So just make sure you read the question really well. It will specify which part, which syllabus, which chapter you are supposed to focus on for that question, and just reading carefully helps. One more thing that you got to be mindful of is that when you're asked to answer the other question about one of the other strategy chapters, the case study itself will have a timeline in it. So in the past papers, for example, we've seen they'll give you a timeline of the last 10 years, and they'll tell you where the business started, how small it was, then it changed perhaps its business structure, it expanded, took over another business, tried and failed at other things. So you'll be given exactly how the time has gone and how the business has developed over the last few years. And where that timeline ends, whichever year that is, that's where the question will begin. And they will say, discuss how effective the marketing strategy was for XYZ company from 2014 till 2024. If you're given that question, and of course a timeline is given, that you must structure your answer according to the timeline in that correct chronological order. So 2014 first, 16, 17, 18, then it simply becomes an assessment job, right? Your tone of your answer for that question will be in the past. That this is what the company did, this is how it would have affected them, this is what they could have done. Obviously, if it's a question on marketing strategy, you would talk about how good their marketing plan was, could they have done better research, or if they did the right research, how they benefited from it. So it's all about commenting about how things have been in the past, and if they've used the right strategies, the right decisions had been made to get to the point towards the end of that timeline. So in a way, it's sort of giving you a format to write. Make sure you go according to the timeline that's given to you. And of course, that means that one part of the question or one part of the case study will be showing you about how things have been in the past. The other question about business strategy, this is the question where they're asking you to come up a strategy for the future. And that's where you will have to use the concept of strategic management. Right? And this is again all across the chapter 6.2 business strategy, where there are 3 stages to it. There is analysis, which has 6 techniques. There is choice, which has 4 techniques, and there's implementation, which has 4 layers. Right? Now, if it's a question which is asking you to talk about developing a business strategy, then you make it a combo of the analysis and choice techniques. So there are 10 across these, 6 in analysis, 4 in choice. What you have to do is use any 3 at least. You could use more, any 3 techniques, and then towards the end of your answer, just make sure you sort of sum it up, that this is what I said above. You could use a combination of SWOT as mentioned above, best tell, core competencies, however you want to end the answer, but you must have a concluding paragraph even after you've discussed all the techniques. Because the question is asking you for an advice. Advice needs to be a culmination of all the points that you mentioned above. So you mentioned, look, this is what I said and I stand behind it. But going forward, just evaluate your answer by saying that, this is dynamic external environment. Look for things that are in the case study that may or may not make the strategy work. So that evaluative comment is coming towards the end. But just before that, make sure you sum up and come up with one paragraph of the strategy itself. Now, before I end, I just want to touch upon something with paper 3. And this isn't something that I've come up with on my own. It's just stuff that is present in the marking scheme that I provided with all the past papers. And if you just go to read through the lines, read through the explanation that the examiners provide you to really understand what it takes to write a good answer. Right? And as you would have learned in your chapter on quality, for example, is that what makes a quality product is, of course, the minimum standards that company wants to give, but it also has to meet customer expectations, right? Treat your answer as a product. And the examiner is the consumer and you are the producer. And if that answer is going to be a quality answer, then it has to have both sides, which means that you must bring in your own minimum standards. So you explain the concepts as best as you can, you put things together, you give your evaluation and all that. So obviously you want to show the best version of your answer. But if it doesn't meet the customer requirements, which is the examiner in this case, then you're not going to get full marks. And the customer requirements are simplified into 4 terms, right? Knowledge, application, analysis, and evaluation. So as long as you stay true to that, and as long as you know which question requires how much detail and which of those elements to be discussed, you will force the examiners to think about giving you full marks. And let me show you what I mean by that. Is if you could just come back to our discussion on paper 3. Right? Now, we know that whatever question you're answering, it will include knowledge, application, analysis, plus evaluation if it's a 12 marker. Right? Now, in the listed marking schemes on the last 2 sessions, and so 2023's marking schemes, they've gone in a lot more detail and told us exactly how the examiner is going to mark you for each point that you develop. And from what I understand is that if you want to gain full marks, or at least force your examiner to think about giving you 4 marks, then this is the way to approach your question. If it's an 8-mark question, then it's going to take a combination of knowledge, application, and analysis. And the questions are going to be, the grading is going to be 2 marks for knowledge, 2 for application, 4 for analysis. That makes it 8 marks, right? Now, what CAIE expects from you is that each point should have certain detail of each of these elements. What I mean by that is whichever point you're writing about, right? Let's say the question is analyze 2 elements of marketing strategy that OV is using, for example. If that's the question, then I know knowledge, particularly they're asking me about marketing strategy, right? So which means I have to talk about their long-term plan. Application is always easy because you simply have to talk about the case itself. And analysis is simply the impact on the business. And whenever it's a question of marketing strategy, we know that we discuss 4 Ps and how they benefit or impact a business. Now, if you are going to write an 8-mark answer with this, then of course you need 2 points. They will mention it that discuss 2 points, which means if you can come up with 2 combos of 4 marks, that's good enough for you for 8 marks. Now, how do you develop 1 point that's going to guarantee you 4 marks, or at least force the examiner to give you them? Each point should be a combination of 6 statements, 6 lines. What that means is that start your answer by saying something about the knowledge of that question. So for example, you mentioned that marketing strategy includes tactics where pricing could be an important factor in the success of a business. So you're mentioning something particular about that concept. That means 1 line of knowledge. And don't define things. There are no marks for defining, there are no marks for long explanation. Just mention 1 benefit of the marketing strategy, 1 element of the marketing strategy that qualifies as knowledge. Then they expect that your application should be done across 2 lines or 2 statements or 2 sentences. So write 2 things about application. That this is what the company is doing in terms of its promotion, and this is how it's being utilized in the business. So it could be
something as simple as they use above the line promotion methods. They are currently using price elasticity to calculate how much should they increase or decrease, and this is how XYZ impact is impacting on them. So just 2 lines for application, that's important. And lastly, to finish that point, they expect the analysis should be done across 3 statements. So in your mind, if you can form 1 point over 6 statements, just like this, then this should be good enough for 4 marks. And of course, the quality of your answer matters a lot, but this is the minimum expectations. And if you're meeting their minimum expectations, then at least you are halfway there in convincing them that it's a quality answer. The other half is going to be how well you write your answer and the logic, then of course the understanding that you have of that concept. So this is what it takes to have 1 good point. And if I have 2 of these, that's where I should be okay for 8 marks. And without a definition, just straight away go into what benefit or what drawback, apply, analyze, and end it. The only way that the 8 marker is different from a 12 marker is that in a 12 marker, they won't mention how many points, but 3 is the bare minimum. So how you're supposed to approach it is that if it's a 12 marker, then everything remains the same. But the difference is in a 12 marker, they also expect evaluation. So I'm just going to write that on top here. In a 12 marker, you need knowledge, application, analysis, as well as evaluation. And this is graded 2, 2, 2, and 6, which means you should spend more time on evaluation, and not just in terms of quantity, the quality, the placement of it. Try to include a point of evaluation at the end of each point. And as long as you follow this process for forming the point, and in terms of evaluation, at the end of each point, just include 2 more lines. So evaluation, that I don't think this will work because of this reason. However, if the government supports, it might still work out. So if you're asked for a 12 marker, go as far as this, per point. And if you can talk about knowledge all the way to evaluation, this is 4 marks each, multiply that by 3, that should be good enough for 12. If it was an 8 marker, finish it here, that's good enough for 8. And if you do this 3 times for 12 marker, that's where your answer ends, which means you don't need to again evaluate the answer. You have done it at every point. That's a more mature way to answer it. Don't just save everything towards the end. Finish your conversation about that point there and then move on. I hope with that you have a better understanding of what paper 3 and paper 4 will look like and feel a little bit more prepared. Of course, practice makes perfect. The more answers you write, the more past papers you do, the better you're going to get. So practice, practice, practice. And whichever case study you look at, it's going to look difficult because you're going to see it for the first time. No 2 case studies look exactly the same. So whenever you see something for the first time, it looks tough. But just start reading through it. And I genuinely believe that they have made it easier for you to score in A2 now. It used to be more difficult when it used to be 1 3-mark paper, but the new paper 3, they have really made it easier by giving you 2 easy 8-mark questions to start with. There are 3 12-mark questions, there are no 20-mark, 8 or 16-mark questions. All 12 markers are no more than a page and a half. There's 2 very easy calculations in each paper. So the 16 marks in paper 3, you can really expect to do really well in that paper. And you don't even have to read so much anymore. Each case will just be a 2 paper long per case study. So not too much data, just read through it carefully. And what I recommend is that always look at the questions first before you read the case study. So you know which points to highlight in the case before you go to your answers. You won't have the time to go back and forth. So make sure you're making notes on the case itself. But it's a shorter paper. It's genuinely an easier paper to score. And I truly believe that you can expect to score highly in your paper 3s. So I hope you have more confidence going into your practice at home these days and eventually for your exams. If you need any help, we're always available for you at Alt Academy. Just holler.